Today we have William Thompson as our guest, and we are going to be talking about his book called Why Does Your Name Matter? William, would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure, I'd love to. Thank you so much for having me on, ladies. It's a real joy to be able to share heart with you guys. My name's William Thompson. I started my business 11 years ago. It's called I'm About You. I've done my whole life is invested into other people through training, working alongside people, encouraging people. And 11 years ago, I realized that I needed to use these gifts, these skills effectively. And the best way to do that for me was to start up my business. I recognized that my identity is rooted in helping other people thrive, which is why we've just got so much synergy going on. My business, as I said, has been going in 11 years. And quite a long time ago, as we'll get into, I started thinking about names and how significant names are. And so 2 years ago, I published my first book.
Brilliant. Well, I have read your book and it was absolutely fascinating. And I share your intrigue with names because for me, when I do a group, I often ask people about the meaning behind their names or their understanding of where their names come from, because I think it is a fascinating clue into people's identity. And I think for me, your book is all about identity. So, how our names reflect our identity, they can shape how we interact with others and influence our sense of belonging in the world.
And for me, as I read it, I thought about identity, but I also thought about connecting. But I suppose the two are sort of intrinsically linked, really, because I guess we need to connect with ourselves in so that we can authentically connect with others as well. What do you think, William?
Yeah, that's very, very interesting. Names are fascinating. I was thinking about this morning. I was thinking about the film Inception with Leonardo DiCaprio and how I remember watching it and thinking, yeah, that was quite good, but I didn't really get it. I enjoyed it as a film, didn't get it. And I watched it a second time and I realized that I'd completely missed the first section. Like I'd missed it. And I'd been able to enjoy the film, but it was only when I rewatched the film and actually connected with that first part, the whole film was just completely different. And I was thinking about conversations, and I was thinking about how I can have a conversation with someone, and they can say, introduce themselves, tell me what their name is, and I go home and I'll say to my wife, I met this amazing person last night. They were, they get up to, they do all sorts of stuff over the weekends. They love horse riding, and they absolutely love eating sushi. And Annika would say to me, okay, well, so what was their name? And I was like, check. I actually can't remember their name. And it's so fascinating. If I could go back and rehab that conversation and actually not miss what I consider to be the most important part, which is the name. The name is this incredible piece of someone's world that we so often just skip straight past to get onto the interesting stuff, which is what they're currently watching on Netflix or what their favorite food might be.
Well, do you know what interested me in your book, and Ruth picked up on it as well, is there's a point at which somebody you really valued, you're having this interaction, and you just couldn't think of their name. And you described the feeling of horror and the sense of him being quite horrified as well. And
Yeah.
We had a bit of a giggle because, but well, as you know, we're both neurodiverse, and holding names in our minds, we both really struggle with that. And we were thinking,
Yeah.
oh well, we've got all sorts of strategies for getting around that, and you're sort of being horrified about it.
Well, you see, if somebody forgets my name, it doesn't offend me at all.
No, same.
So, but I am intrigued by names, and I am intrigued by how. Well, I think this discussion really is about identity and what shapes our unique sense of self. So I think our identity is about our values, our beliefs, our goals, and it's shaped by lots of different factors. So internal factors, our social environments. Um, and in your book, you mention how our identity is also defined through our relationships. And I thought that was such an important point, that it's we discover ourselves. There's an unveiling that takes place in connection with those around us. So I thought maybe we could have a think about the clues that our names offer to others about our identity and the opportunity it gives others to get to know us.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a couple of things there.
Mm-hmm.
As far as finding a way of remembering names, you wouldn't believe how many people say to me, William, I'm terrible at remembering names. And I'm very good at remembering faces, but I'm terrible at remembering names. And I really believe that's because we don't see the intentionality behind names. So it really is a practice. And if you're listening to this or you're watching this and you struggle with names, honestly, if you start taking a really significant interest in that person's name, it's going to revolutionize your capacity to remember names. So one of the things in my book I talk about is the mnemonic APT. It's
Mm-hmm.
quite apt. So ask, pause, and then think. What can I ask about this person's name? What can I connect this name to? And then sometimes it's very easy. It might be like, do you know what? I've never heard that name before, or I'm so sorry, I didn't hear that name correctly the first time, particularly if it's someone with a name from a different culture from us. So quite often saying, what does your name mean is a really exciting way. And I'm thinking now, I remember having a conversation with someone yesterday from a from an African culture, and they told me their name, and they said, and I said to them, so what does your name mean? And it said love. And and although I struggled with remembering their first name because it was a name that I struggled with, I remembered that their name meant love, and it was so exciting because it gave me that capacity, that ability to connect with them in a different way. So actually, what this does is when you start to step into an intentionality of a name, it will give you more coat hangers or more ways of remembering the name. It's almost like you're telling yourself a more interesting story. Because if we just see a name as 5, 10 letters, mind you, 10 letters is a very long name, 5 or 7 letters, however many, um, it's just an arbitrary word that just goes in one ear and out the other. But as soon as you step into that name and start to, as Georgina, as you were starting to say, as you start to explore who that person is in their name, it becomes much more memorable.
William, I'm intrigued. Tell me the story behind your name.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so as a child, I didn't like my name. I didn't like it. It felt I just wasn't comfortable with it, and I was bullied quite a lot as a kid, and I was called Willie, and I didn't like it at all. And it was in my teenage years that I said, right, well, I'd like to be called Will, which felt very young and energetic and accessible. And and it was only when I turned 40 that I was like, do you know what? I feel like I don't want to be called Will anymore. I feel like I want to be called William. And it was like I'd stepped into a maturity that for me connected with my name. It was really strange. And it was so fascinating. Honestly, I was having this conversation with a chap the other day. Honestly, it's like 2 weeks ago, and he said, yeah, my name's Will, um, and and I was talking to my brother the other day, and he said, now He's 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 Will and his brother's Robbie. He said, when we get into our 40s, we've decided I'm going to be William, he's going to be Robert. And when we get into I think he said, when we get into our 60s, I'm going to be Bill and he's going to be Bob. So they'd already connected a transition in their seasons of maturity with a changing in their name, which is fascinating.
It is interesting, and I think sometimes names do change as we we develop and grow. So I'm thinking about Kate Middleton. When she married William, she became Catherine, didn't she? She's now Princess Catherine. And there's something about the weight of that name kind of fitting her station in life. My name, people have often, well, I remember growing up often being called George. My grandmother would call me Gina, but Georgina has always been the version that has stuck. And to be honest, I don't mind generally how people shorten it, but Georgina comes from the Greek meaning farmer, so we're meant to be all green-fingered, which isn't true of me at all. But it was my father's choice, and I was actually named after Miss Georgina from Upstairs Downstairs, which kind of ages me, really. That's how. There was no deep and meaningful reason.
And that's in your book you talk about how it links you to your previous generations as well. So that links to your parents, and there's something about that as well, that our heritage, would you say, is that?
Yeah, absolutely. So so for me, the change of my name was something that I grew into my name, and that's the experience of a lot of people. I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people. It took me 7 years to write. Well, it actually took me 5 years to write the book, and then 2 years to actually edit it and publish it. But you would not believe the number of people that felt that they grew into their name as they came to terms with who they were and their identity as a person. They came to terms with their name, which was very, very interesting. I matured into my name, but also it was a huge revelation for me when my mum explained that I was called William after her stepfather, who I knew as Bill. Um, and that was a fascinating conversation, and one that only happened in my 40s. And what I found so interesting was I thought, I wonder if, as a young person, if my mum had ever sat me down and said, "Look, William, this is why we named you William after my stepfather, and we gave you that name because of the way that he looked after me, even though I wasn't his daughter, and we wanted to honour that." I wonder if that would have had an impact in me to have seen my name and valued my name in a different way. So you're absolutely right. It's in these conversations. And one of the things I just wanted to, it's so funny you saying that, Georgie, I'd just like to just encourage you straight off the bat that although you don't consider yourself a farmer in the sense of green fingers, what does a farmer do? A farmer is someone who uh, cultivates a crop and wants to see it thrive. And there is absolutely something about you that farms in the sense of creating an environment where people grow and thrive. So you're
Ooh.
definitely
Oh,
a
he's
farmer.
good, isn't he, Georgina? He's
Yeah.
good.
It's true.
Cute.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I feel that I've grown into my name. I thought it was quite a frumpy old lady name when I was younger. I wanted to be like cool and trendy, and I did my best to be cool and trendy, but I don't think I ever really was. But as I've aged, I do think, yeah, Ruth's my name, and it fits me now. So yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
well, in your book, you mention a lady called Befrin. Well, she has two
Yeah.
names. She had a Kurdish name, and forgive me, I can't remember her other name, but her parents, her father registered her in a different name from the name her mother
Yeah.
wanted, and I'm with the mother on this one. Her mother continued to call her by the name that she had intended from her conception, and she described different parts of her identity being attached to the two different names.
Yeah. Fascinating. Fascinating. So it was her Kurdish name is Serva, which is to do with a fresh breeze. And that was
Yes.
something that her mum connected with her while she was carrying her in her womb. And so, but her father was Swedish and didn't speak a lot of, and there was all to do with the documentation when it was written. Anyway, so all the conversation while the mother was pregnant, they talked about this child being called Serva, Serwa, Serva. That was the Kurdish name, and when the child was born, obviously the mother was being looked after, and the father went and filled out the naming documentation, and it came back that he'd named her Befrin, which is a Swedish name, and this is a name that hadn't been discussed with the mum at all, and the father said, you know, I was never going to take the name that you wanted to give my daughter. I was always going to give her a name that I wanted to give her. It's such an interesting dynamic right there. And so what happened was Befrin or Serva grew up holding both of these names because the mum continued to call her Serva, whereas her father always called her Befrin, and she associated Befrin with a kind of with the Swedish side of her family, which was very white, very organized, very disciplined, and Serva she connected with her Kurdish side, which she felt was more joyous, more charismatic, more people focused. And so she's walked through her life holding both of these names in tension, but also holding both of these cultures in tension. So she is Kurdish and she is Swedish, but they're such different cultures that she has a name that connects with each of those cultures. And it was one of those just gorgeous interviews that was just, I felt
Wow.
sometimes when I'm talking about names, it honestly feels like I'm walking on holy ground.
Oh,
That's
Ooh.
how intimate it
yes.
is.
Yes, yes. Do you know, as you were talking there, I was thinking about that's quite unusual to have that and for the identities to be like that. And then I was just thinking about when, in our culture, when a woman marries, you take the surname of your husband.
Yeah.
And what that transition is like.
You often do, Ruth. You don't always.
Well, no,
Yeah.
I've got a couple of French friends, and in France, you don't take the surname of your husband
No,
as standard.
in Norway, in lots of different cultures, they don't.
Yeah, it's quite fascinating, and there is a transition, isn't there? I remember when I got married, kind of saying, calling myself Mrs. Ryden. It just made me giggle because I was just like, I don't know, it felt so grown up. There was such a change and a transition, and sort of taking that on. And now I can't imagine using my maiden name.
Well, I got married older, and my name was my name. I don't use my husband's name. Somebody at school referred to me as Mrs. And I walked past. I was like, who? Um, but yeah, and I don't know. Maybe if I had got married younger, I might have felt differently. Um, but yes, I think that for some people there is tension around that.
I just follow up on that because that's really, really interesting. And I'm sure that there are people that are going to be listening to this that are going to have wrestled with that, particularly if they've subsequently got divorced or if they've been abused by the person that in that relationship. Now we know that abuse works both ways, uh, but quite often in a situation where a woman has got married to someone, taken on board their surname, and built a lot of her identity around that surname, and then has experienced abuse and has stepped out of that relationship, it's really challenging. And I was invited to speak at a charity on the Wirral uh, by an organization that works with women who have been abused and talk to them about their names and how the surname that might be connected with their abuser or their children are named after their abuser and the pain of that. And so talking about using names as a way to explore this wrestling of who am I in the face of what I've experienced, or subsequently following the breakdown of a relationship. Even if your partner has tragically, you've lost that partner through death, it's still something that you're carrying and something you have to come to terms with. So yes, and this is something that you've both of you have mentioned through this time together, is the understanding of who am I and identity in the face of names. So I just wanted to mention that before we got onto Gary's story. But yes, it is something. And again, if people are wrestling with that and trying to come to terms with who am I, particularly in the sense of names, then that is something that is really worth exploring and spending time talking through for some people.
Yes.
Did you notice any themes in terms of pulls to change names when you spoke with these women, or a move to an acceptance, or a sort of re sort of configuring in their mind what the name means, or what did you observe?
Wow. As soon as I mean, it's, you can imagine how privileged I felt and how vulnerable I felt as a man stepping into an environment with women who had been abused by men. I felt incredibly, um, I felt very humbled to be allowed to step into such an intimate place with them. It was really humbling. Um, but really, the ones who'd come to terms with it had understood that although your name is a part of you and something that does identify you as with, it's not who you really are. It's not the fullness of who you are. In the same way, my identity is rooted in who I am. My name is an aspect of that, just as the color of my hair is an aspect of that. I know my hair is like my mum. I know my eyes are like my mum. In fact, almost everything about me is like my mum. There's very few things about me that are like my dad, but those things are pointers towards relationship that helps me to understand and come to terms with who I am and my identity, but it's not the fundamental root. So if you find your identity in anything other, either your physical state, your financial position, your gender, your sexuality, any of these things, if these become your sole root of your identity, that can be problematic. Even your name. Your name isn't your identity. Your name is something that you can use to explore and ask those questions. Who am I?
Oh,
Thank
lovely.
you. So I'd like to talk about Gary's story because I was really
Of course.
fascinated about his journey into finding his purpose and how that began. It was pretty hardcore, his life growing up, one of rejection. They were rejected in the community because his brother was disabled, and the community blamed his mother. His mother was overwhelmed. Gary ended up going into care, kind of semi with aunties, semi in care, sometimes at home. It was a tough upbringing. And it was when his parents died that his aunt introduced him to a little box of photos of his generations, and he got into researching his family tree. And well, this is my take on it. I would love to meet Gary, but
Please,
my
please.
my belief is that he kind of possibly came to understand a little bit more about the family's journey and who he was through researching the generations. And it was in generating that solid sense of who he was, he decided what he wanted to do. And this man is a phenomenon. He went on to be the mayor. He's got several charities. He really gives to his community. So he says, my research into my family tree was for me. But what I learned is I want to give back to others. That is what matters.
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. You're
He
absolutely
was
right, George.
fascinating. And so I think there's something about how we come to understand ourselves, and from that position of understanding, having that confidence to move in our talents, to move in our skills, um, and in a direction that gives us meaning and purpose.
Very good. So identity is critical. We all recognize that the biggest question is, who am I? Because when you know who you are, you've fixed. It's like an anchor that you've put in the ground that is then firm ground that holds you. The challenge is, what are you anchoring yourself into? Now, what 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 Gary experienced, and again, you're really much better to speak to him one to one. He is absolutely the most extraordinary man. When his parents died, and his auntie Ina opened up this box, and reconnected with his family, and he started to understand where he'd come from, that he felt grounded in in a reality that and then enabled him to step into these extraordinary things. So that was a massive shift for him, really profound. Um, and really, the question is, what steps are we each taking in trying to find out who we are and finding our grounding in that search? Because if our anchor is in something flimsy that that is that is weak, and either in a relationship, I mean, I've got three teenage children. Well, actually, one's 20 now. I've got my children. They're trying to understand who they are, of course, like, as we all do, and they're trying to understand, who am I in this relationship? And it's so, young people particularly are vulnerable to trying to find themselves in a relationship. I know who I am because of this relationship that I'm in, and that relationship, as we all know, can break down and can become abusive, or just can break. So what do we root ourselves in? What do we find ourselves in? And yeah, Gary's story is an amazing story. Uh, yeah, there's a number of individuals whose stories and their engagement with their names are really significant. And again, if there are people listening and they've never taken that step into, who am I in the light of generations, then I'd really encourage you and urge you to do that. There's a lot of people that I interviewed that I've said to them, do you know why you were given your name? And lots of people are like, absolutely no idea at all. That's never been a question that they've asked their namer. And the namer isn't always their parent. So a namer, depending on culture, a namer can be a grandparent who might have died, or a namer can be an aunt or an uncle, a matriarch or a patriarch in their society, even a specific leader or elder in the community. So if you haven't asked that question, I'd urge you to do that. Please, why was I given this name? What was on the heart? So one of the aspects of the book is, what was on the heart of the namer.
Mm-hmm.
And this makes me think about another theme in your book as well, where there's something about, and this is how I think about how we connect to the future and our names in another way, which is about, can we live in a way that beautifies our names to others? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
It's so funny. There's a lot of research online about certain names that trigger. Like, oh, it doesn't matter how many beep, 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 beeps I meet, they're always the same. Or you go into a school and you're like, okay, if I had to tell you that you've got a naughty child in coming into your class, what is that child called? And they will say straight away, this. And I'm not going to say it because I don't want to upset anyone that's watching this. It really happens.
Yeah, the opposite way around. Somebody said to me, I've never met a mean Elizabeth. so I think, yeah, maybe it can fit both ways, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure what people will think of Georgina's, but I'll be the best Georgina I can be.
You go, girl. You go, girl. And that's the thing. You know, we do have we do build subconscious biases towards certain names, particularly if you've had a particular, if there was a child in your, if you're a teacher and you taught a child called William who was just really annoying, and then 2 years later you get another boy coming to your class also called William who's also annoying. Oh my goodness, what is it about boys called William that are just really annoying? And it starts to become this thing that boys called William are just a pain in the neck. Um, so if you have got a name that a lot of people associate with or have experienced being annoying, be the person to redeem that name.
oh, I like that. I like how you took that to take ownership, because what the other person is doing is projecting onto you their experience and their expectations of you. So I
Very good.
really like what you've said there. There's something about claiming it and showing something different, shining your light into the world, if you like. So, William, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate talking with you and your insights. And I would highly recommend the book as well.
Yes, and we hope to talk to you again, William.
This has been
Thank
really
you.
great. I've absolutely loved it, and there's so much more to talk about. I'm just thrilled that you've connected with this stuff, and I really hope that you treasure your names, and that anyone who's listening to this uses the, an awareness of the significance of names as a bridge. So this is really my heart, that you, those of you that are listening or watching this, see a name as a bridge into somebody else's world. And you'll be amazed at where a conversation will go if you take an interest in someone else's name.